Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, more like this. Part 9. The Snoopy Dog. It was dark outside, and I was scared. Mom and Dad went to bed and left the fire to burn down to coals in the living room fireplace, where we roasted hot dogs and marshmallows for supper. There were potato chips with waves on them. Barbecue was my favorite. But that's not the kind we had the plain ones. I was in bed too, but it was too cold and I got out and went into the living room where it was warmer. I didn't turn on the lights because I didn't want Mom and Dad to find me and get mad. I sat in front of the fireplace and shivered. I was still cold. Then the dog came. It was a big dog, a dark dog, and I knew it was a Doberman. It had a long nose and black eyes that made me feel funny to the point where I would pee. I didn't want to be close to it, but it wouldn't let me get away. It bit me bad. It bit me all over and in the places I'm not supposed to touch except when I take a bath. When it bit me, it didn't bleed all these little holes all over my body, and no blood came out. Instead, I tasted chocolate, like I just ate a big candy bar. Every time I tasted my mouth, it tasted like chocolate cake and chocolate milk and hot fudge all swirled together. My mouth tastes like chocolate, said Whisker. Do you like it? Said the dog. Very much, said Whisker. Now I will bite you some more, said the dog. The holes on my body were gone, until the dog bit me again and chewed on my thing and growled and scratched at me, and made more holes, and I wanted to cry so much because it hurt more than all the things that ever hurt me hurt all combined. I tasted trash and pume, and boiled asparagus and ice cream, cones covered with ants on the ground, and I shivers because I was freezing. But my between my legs parts burned like they were in the fireplace, and the dog smiled. All these big ugly teeth at me like an alligator who never went to the dentist. My mouth tastes bad and my pee-pee hurts, said Whisker. Do you like it? Said the dog. No. I hate it, said Whisker. Then you have to do things for me, said the dog. Like what? Said Whisker. Hurt your friends, said the dog, and he licked my face all over like he loved me. I went to school and hit Brett with a rock. Then I saw Bash, and I kicked her in the face. Chaz wanted to play soccer, but I just beat him on the head with a stick and called him names and said his mom was dead because he was stupid. Shane wasn't really a friend, but I hurt him too. I drove over him with his dad's truck until he cried. I hurt them as much as I could and hoped it would be enough. At night when I was in bed, the dog came in and started biting my legs. I tried to kick it, but it held me down and rubbed its face against me, biting me more, and I tasted chocolate again, and it made me feel good so. And it crawled up on me and breathed in my face. Why do you keep biting me? Said Whisker. It's the only way you learn, said the dog. It bit me again, and this time the holes bled drops of blood like marshmallows that grew into kittens with no fur and bloody noses that cried and squeaked at me. I knew all their bones were broken because they moved like jello. Make them go away, said Whisker. You didn't do what I told you, said the dog. I'd hurtthemal, said Whisker. All but one, said the dog. And that's why I brought them back. They're dead, said Whisker. You didn't love them enough, said the dog. You're lying, said Whisker. You're tiger, said the dog, and it licked me because it loved me. I don't want to see them anymore, said Whisker. Then you have to hurt Damon, said the dog. I thought you already did that, said Whisker. I guess I did, said the dog. It went away and I went back to sleep. There were no more kittens. Mom read the top of the piece of notebook paper. Bad Dog by Whisker White, age 7, and let out a long, slow breath from her bottom lip. This is appalling. I sat with Mom and Dad, in between them, on a high-back chair that scratched me through my shirt and pants. We were in Mrs. Greer's office with Mrs. Eswood, who sat next to Mrs. Greer on the same kind of chair, but looked perfectly comfortable, which looked tired and bored to everyone else. I rarely saw Mrs. Eswood smile, but when she did she was pretty. Most of the time, though, she looked worn down. I liked her okay, but I was pretty sure she didn't feel the same way about me, and that is why I thought we were all sitting together with Mrs. Greer after school. Mrs. Eswood spoke softly, like we were in the library. So you can see, Mrs. White, why we thought we should bring this to your attention. I should hope so. I really don't know what to say. Whisker is a good student, generally attentive. I looked to Dad, who looked to me and smiled, and then I looked to Mom, who also smiled, but only with her mouth. But I think this year, let me think, it shows there are deeper issues that should be addressed. Like, well, Mrs. Greer cut in. Mrs. White, call me Catherine. Catherine, okay, we are not here to lay blame or intimate Whisker. As any as yet unconfirmed issues, we are merely trying to assess the situation before it becomes a bigger problem. It was Dad's turn. Are you saying there's a problem? Not as such, which is why we are here, as we are in a position to help should the need arise. Mom was unconvinced. This smells like a witch hunt to me. We assure you, it is most certainly not. We only wish to make everyone aware of the situation. MRSS would lean forward slightly. This is a delicate. You are subject we will handle only with the utmost discretion. Naturally. We just want to ensure Whisker's best interest is taken into account. Are you saying I don't have my son's best interest at heart? Not at all. We only. Mrs. Greer gestured politely for silence. What we are saying is everyone here wants what is best for Whisker, and that is why we asked you to be here. MRSS would concurred with a wan smile. Are we done here? I think so, unless you have any questions or wish to voice any concerns. Nothing, Mr. White? I don't have anything. What about you? Whisker, is there anything you want to tell us? No, right then, thank you so much for coming in. Mrs. Greer smiled and offered her hand to Mom, who just looked at it. Whatever. Dad offered his hand to Mrs. Greer and Mrs. Eswood, eliciting warm smiles. Thanks. We got in the car and headed home, but the conversation was only getting started. I can't believe they acted like we were the problem. Do you think we are? What are you? Those women are idiots. I don't know about that. Of course you don't. I saw the way they fawned all over you. What? Oh, don't act all innocent with me. They were staring at your crotch the whole time. I honestly didn't see it. I don't know how you couldn't. They were drooling. What about Whisker? What about him? You read what he wrote. Do you think he needs help? He needs a better teacher. I think MRSS Wood is an okay teacher. Whisker is bright, he is creative. saw me writing about the things he reads and sees on TV. He sees that stuff on TV. You know what I mean. It's his age and you know he doesn't like dogs. I think there's more to it than that. Are you saying you agree with them? Maybe. Well, why don't you just have them take turns sucking your dick while you're at it? Does it always have to be that way with you? Me? You're the one practically offering yourself to them for crucifix. Let's just not go there. How about you drop us off at the car and go back to the Y or wherever the hell it is you're living these days? Fine. I was hoping the ride home would include 2 forms of cow. But we went straight to the house and Mom ordered a large pizza for delivery from Pizza Bill's and I deemed it a worthy alternative. Pizza Bill's had the best pizza ever and let me tell you why. That pepperoni would shrink and turn upward with drops of grease like little soup bowls, and the surrounded cheese had its own languid pools of grease. The sauce was sweet, but not too sweet, and salty, but not too salty. The crust tasted like it had beer in it, and I've never had one that even came close since. Sure, it was the cardiovascular equivalent of Armageddon, but to my 7-year-old taste buds, it was me behind a kissing booth in a sea of chocolate-lipped and tongued Van Moms. It was really good pizza. Mom sat next to me on the couch and we ate in the front room with the TV off, drinking Pepsi and making hungry people eating noises. Second stomach took the wheel, my very own one-organ cheer squad, and praised every slice. Every bite they cut the pizza in squares instead of rectangles, so they were smaller than the average piece, but one wouldn't know it by the way it was going. Mom watched me while I ate. You're not crazy, you know. I stopped mid-bite and put the pizza on my plate. What? Those women are wrong about you. But I like Mrs. Greer. You're not sick. Did she say that? Not in so many words. Am I in trouble? You're scared. I don't feel scared. It's okay if you are. It is. I'm scared too. The next day, Mrs. Greer pulled me out of class and asked me to come with her to her office, where she shut both doors and we were alone. She smiled, the way she usually did, and I could see it was in her eyes as well as her mouth, so I knew it meant she was happy to see me. I sat down in one of the scratchy chairs across from her, but she asked me to sit next to her, so I did. She pulled her chair close and leaned forward so we were face to face, and I could feel her breath on my nose and cheeks. She liked coffee. Whisker, I'd like to talk to you a little about yesterday. Okay, do you remember what we talked about? Yes. I have your story right here and I must say, it's very creative. I waited for her to continue. Did you make all this up yourself? I wasn't sure how to answer. There are some things here that I find very interesting. For instance, I see you write in the first person. You say, I or we, but in the parts where you speak, you refer to yourself in third person, by your name. I looked at the paper, then at the floor. Is that bad? Well, I don't imagine it's what Mrs. Eswood teaches you, but it's not bad. No. I'm just curious as to why you wrote it that way. Do you know why that is? Not really. So there's no reason in particular? It felt like I stuttered and slouched in the chair. It's okay. It felt like someone else said it. Okay, that's very good. She smiled again, and I smiled back this time. I liked Mrs. Greer. Now what about this part here, the part with the dog? Doberman. The Doberman. The Doberman. The Doberman is bad. Yes, he's very bad. He hurt you in the story. He always hurts me. That's terrible. Is this a pet? A dog you have at home? Not really. Not really. A relative's dog? A neighbor's? No. I got bit when I was little. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Was it bad? I had to get stitches. And it hurt, I bet. A lot. So this bad dog, this is that same dog. Sort of. Sort of. Yes. What makes this bad dog different? You trust me, don't you? Then you can tell me anything. I want to help you. Whisker. Okay. Why is the bad dog different from the one that hurt you when you were little? It lives in the bottle. Bottle? Like a pop bottle? No. I took a pen from Mrs. Greer's desk, a blank piece of paper, and began to draw. I made sure every line was perfect and showed every feature. I liked using a pencil better because I could erase my mistakes. But the picture came out almost exactly the way I wanted it to. This one. This is very good. Whisker, what is it? The Snoopy dog. I told Mrs. Greer about the Snoopy dog. About the trip with Jazz to the arcade. But not the part with Haley. About Mom and Dad fighting a lot and how I dreamed Chaz's mom was in a bad accident. I avoided the subjects of bed books, Bashai and KY and the Dad's bottom dresser drawer. There was only so much I could take, and only so much. I was convinced Mrs. Greer would believe. You're a very brave little boy, if you say so. I do you Ray more like a man, like your father. I dunno. Look at me. I looked up and straight into Mrs. Greer's vibrant green eyes and for the first time saw how much they were somewhere I wanted to be. There was a deepness of love and understanding no one I yet knew ever possessed. And I knew when I was there, in those barrel rice paper partitions, caressing me like flower petals. I was utterly lost and would never want to be found. She was watching me as I slouched, and I wondered briefly if she was staring at my crotch. Mrs. Greer. Call me Lydia. Okay, Lydia. That's nice. You're nice. She was wearing a tweed business suit and a puffy, pleated blouse with an unpretentious neckline underneath. I saw her heels were off, somewhere under the desk, as she shrugged out of the jacket which she draped over the back of her chair. I wondered why it was suddenly so warm and my jeans were so tight. But when I looked down, it was clear Lydia chuckled and began to unbutton her blouse. Soft, slender fingers maneuvering ivory discs through silky slits. And I was gulping air. She was smiling with only half her mouth. But all of those luscious eyes. And when the blouse came off and I beheld the soft pendulum tethering her modest breasts, I felt faint. Put your hands here. She took them and placed them lateral to her chest so that my palms just lightly brushed exposed skin. She inhaled sharply. Now give me your lips. I kissed her like I remembered kissing Van Mom in the drape, eyes closed, using my tongue where appropriate, and she held my hands where they were. I always liked Mrs. Greer, Lydia, but now it was becoming something more. She was someone I thought I might be able to trust with the whole truth, not the heavily edited one she inherited only moments before. She wanted to help me, as I wanted to help myself to her. Whisker. Oh, Lydia. WHISK. Are you listening to me? Huh? I asked if there was anything else you wanted to share. Shamefaced, I wiped my mouth with my sleeve and slumped deeper in the chair. I think that's everything. Thank you for being so honest with me. I know it must have been hard. That about covers it. Yeah, it's okay. I'm okay. Lydia. Mrs. Greer leaned right into my face, piercing me with her eyes. Now listen to me. I'm going to do everything I can to help you. Do you understand? Yes. Good. Do you need anything? Can I, what is it? Can I have a hug? Absolutely. We hugged from our chairs, and I knew she was smiling. I was too. When I saw up at that weekend, we went to a Mexican place in the city. We only went to on special occasions, and as such was the case. I'd only eaten there once before. It was in a building next to a wide alley, and had a huge mural on the side facing it with big people, and cars, and even a steam miner ship. It was called Witch and Weasel, a name I both loved to say, and thought was funny for any kind of place you might eat. But the food was good, and I thought maybe Dad had something exciting in store for our visit. When he told me where we were going, I cheered WITCHA, and he WEASEL until we arrived. Even out the window, where an older man walking by waved and shouted back, HYA, each like a cool day, man. The inside was kind of dark, but it reminded me of nights when Dad would make spaghetti sauce and we ate with the lights off. Just candles, and he and Mom drank wine while we waited for the food. Dad was looking around. He seemed nervous. What's wrong? Oh, nothing. Is it about what I wrote? No. No, but while we were on the subject, and here's the steak tacos, with beans, and Mexican egg rolls. Is there anything else I can get you? Some more water, please. Sure, would you like some more water? Please. I'll be right back with those. Dad waited for the water before he spoke. Does your mom let you watch scary movies? I don't watch scary movies. I don't watch scary movies. What about books? I read a lot of King Arthur. I like dragons. Okay. That was about it. We finished eating, walked around town for a while, went to the library so I could get a card, and it was time to take me back to Mom. On the way, I thought about the things Dad asked me, and what Mom told me when we ate pizza, and I realized Dad only ever had questions, and Mom only ever had answers. I suppose that's why they used to work so well together. Try this one. Adie had a white one in between her thumb and forefinger, which she held out for me, and I took it, squeezing it between my fingers and popping it in my mouth. What flavor is this? What does it taste like? I can't tell. Adie got another white one and put it in her mouth, making her thinking face. I think it's pineapple. I like it. Thought you might. What are they? They're called gummy bears. Do you have more? Try this one. It was red like Santa's outfit, and when I ate it tasted like how I imagined Mrs. Greer's lips did. Her lipstick was the same shade. Adie had a whole bag she bought while she and Mom were Christmas shopping, and she got them out while we were waiting for cookies to bake. We sat at the kitchen table together, which was a nook, with 3 benches attached to the walls, and a wooden chair with a woven seat on the outside. Wire racks full of cookies were all over the table, and Mom was in the process of mixing up amaretto icing to put on the cutout ones. There were almond snowballs, 7-layer and chocolate pinwells as well. Second stomach howled with drunken anticipation, and I knew I was headed for a sugar coma. It sounds like you love your sister. Yeah, I'll be right back. Mrs. Greer went out the door on the wall behind her desk, and came back several minutes later with a cup of coffee and a can of Orange Crush. It wasn't as good as Pepsi, but I liked orange and I liked pop, so the two together spelled win in my book. Besides, it was something from Mrs. Greer, and anything from her was something I wanted. Is that flavor okay? Yes. Good, now I want you to tell me more about the Snoopy dog. Like what? Do you know what it wants? Me to do bad things? What kind of bad things? Be mean and dumb. It's okay. And hurt people. Like all the names, hurt their feelings? That and hurt them, you know. Their bodies. Oh dear. It makes me scared. I know, honey. I liked it when she called me honey. It gives me bad dreams. Do you have them a lot? Yes. Do you lose a lot of sleep? Some. Okay, you said you had a dream Jazz's mom was hurt. I dreamed she was in a car accident. I decided to leave out the part with the kissing. I didn't want her to get the wrong idea. Are you saying you knew she was going to be in an accident? It was in the dream. I didn't know it was her until later. When? Jazz showed me a picture and I knew her. Did you tell Jazz? No. It's okay, you didn't do anything wrong. I think maybe that it's going to be for today. Okay. Are you okay? Do you feel alright? Yeah. Okay. Good. Mrs. Greer smiled, and it made me happy, even though talking about all the bad things made me feel sad and scared. Her smile was second only to her eyes, which made me feel all mushy inside. Whisker, will you do something for me? Anything? I think I know something that could help you a great deal. What? I want you to bring me the Snoopy dog. My stomach fell through the floor. I sat on my bed after I was supposed to be asleep. It was dark in my room, but I could still see from the street lamp coming in through my window. The Snoopy dog was sitting on the shelf, but now it was facing me. Mrs. Greer is nice, you. Do you like her? It slowly rotated, back and forth. Like it was shaking its head. She asked me nice. It moved again, the same way. She makes me feel safe. That's supposed to be your job since Dad's not here. The Snoopy dog began to shudder violently. All you do is make me scared. I'm taking you too. It shot from the shelf and hovered in front of me, swaying back and forth. School. My forehead jolted with pain. White hot sparks. Something licked my face before I blacked out. One white whisker. Previous next. The second story. The Snoopy dog. Part 2. The Snoopy dog. Dad was a cologne and aftershave man. He used a dented metal cup with a soap cake and horsehair brush to create a lather when he'd shave. The razor was old. Was his father's. When I was little, I used to watch him in the bathroom with a towel wrapped around his waist, leaning over the sink, and the great big white GL ops of whipped cream with little black flecks of hair and sometimes blood plopped into the basin. I often wished he wouldn't turn the water on, because I liked the way it whirled down the drain on its own. The little drops of blood where he cut himself were especially neat with the way they turned pink at the edges when they mixed with the suds. It reminded me of a strawberry sundae with chocolate sprinkles. If the cut was bad, he used a styptic pencil. But normally he just used little bits of toilet paper. Then he'd put on aftershave and the whole room would smell like him. He kept the bottle in a little cabinet above the toilet, one I was expressly forbidden to get into. There was an eye-hook lock near the top. I couldn't reach even when I stood on the toilet seat. Mom caught me up there once and spanked me so hard I couldn't sit for 2 days. I loved my dad like any kid does on Valentine's Day. Mom and, well worse, and I held her hand while we looked at the big bins of candies and roasted nuts, and I got one of those with an orange cartoon cat. Then we went to the section for dads, and Mom wanted to get him a fancy electric razor, since the one he used was old. But I saw a bottle of the cologne he liked and said we should get that instead. You think he would like it? I think so. Do you want to give it to him for Valentine's Day? I was 5 years old. That wasn't the Snoopy dog cologne. I don't really remember what it was anymore. Honestly, from that point on I got my dad cologne for every Valentine's Day until he passed away. Now that I think about it, I don't really remember how he ended up with the Snoopy dog. I only remember seeing it on his dresser one morning, and it always had the cologne I bought him, and he wore every weekend. At first, I wanted the Snoopy dog. I loved the Peanuts specials on TV, and the strips in the funny section of the Sunday newspaper, and Snoopy was my favorite after Schroeder. But whenever I was in Dad's room and no one was there, I never really felt alone. In fact, it felt like I was being studied, not just watched, but more like the way a scientist looks at its subject. I didn't want to go into the bedroom unless Mom or Dad was in there, because at first I thought it was something about the room that made me uncomfortable. It was terrible when I would have nightmares and I wanted to sleep in bed with them where it was safe. The last time I did, I had a bad dream about an army of badgers that broke into the house and were creeping through the halls looking for little boys to eat. I ran into the bedroom and woke my dad and told him badgers were going to get me. He opened one eye, frowned, and told me to crawl into bed next to Mom and he would go take a look. I wanted to tell him he should bring something for protection, but he was already out in the hallway in his underwear, and I cowered beneath the sheets with only my face uncovered so I could see if Annie tried to get into the bedroom. Not that it would have done any good. A couple minutes later, he came back saying he couldn't find anything and got back in bed. I huddled in between him and Mom and tried to get back to sleep, but something made me feel funny in my stomach. I peered over the covers and looked around the room and saw the Snoopy dog sitting on the dresser. It was glowing softly, like my bedroom when moonlight came through the window, but it didn't illuminate anything around it as I watched it. I could see it smiling at me. I mean, it was always smiling, but somehow I knew this time it wasn't just smiling, but doing it at me. My stomach started to hurt and then I could see it, and they were sharp, like an alligator, and the smile stretched up the sides of the Snoopy dog's head almost to its ears. I was so scared I buried my head under the covers and pillows and eventually fell asleep, even though my stomach still felt bad. From that point forward, I avoided the Snoopy dog at all cost. Daddy, can you shut the bedroom door? Sure. Kiddo, and can you keep it the way all the time? Okay. Why? Please. I need to know why, son. The room. I mean, it scares me. I'll keep it shut then. Dad usually kept the door open, even at night when he and Mom were asleep. But he started keeping it closed, or mostly closed when he napped. For the most part, I couldn't see the Snoopy dog from the hallway, because my room was kitty corner from my parents. And the only other room was my sister's, who was away at college, and I had no reason to go down there. Once in a while, though, I'd notice the door was cracked open during the day, and when I'd look inside, I'd see the Snoopy dog on the dresser, looking right at me. I only ever saw it glow with the alligator teeth the one time, but the smile never went back to its normal size. As time went on, I stopped thinking about the Snoopy dog, even when Dad wore his cologne, and things pretty much got back to normal. That is, until the day it got out of the bedroom. I was 6 and in kindergarten yet. I was held back a year, not because I was stupid. I just had trouble getting along with other kids. That was the polite conversation version. The real story is I was beating someone up or getting beat up on an almost daily basis. I went to a private school because my parents thought it would afford me the attention I likely wouldn't get in public school. And while that wasn't necessarily true, a handful of kids with those problems is manageable. But a school full of them. The building sat like a spider in a wooded area owned by an old money family, and recess, weather permitting, often consisted of breaking off into 2 teams, heading into the woods, and spending the next 30 minutes throwing rocks and sticks at each other. If someone got hit, we'd immediately stop and make sure it wasn't a serious or obvious injury. Then it was back to business, until we heard the whistle. That day I was the recipient of a rather impressive bruise from a broken tree branch with a knotted spike tended hurt like hell and turned yellowish purple almost immediately. Everyone gathered around to inspect it, and one of the older kids had the wherewithal to spread fresh mud over it, in some white suburban 11-year-old equivalent of primitive medicine. It was far enough up my arm my sleeve hid it sufficiently, and I did everything I could to keep my mom from seeing it. She was already overprotective, overbearing, and enough other overs I knew. It was in my best interest to keep it from her. When I got home, I went straight to my room and closed the door. This really wasn't anything out of the ordinary. I spent a lot of time in there with my toys and games after school and would play with them until it was time for supper. I had other things in mind that day, however. I decided to put on a long-sleeved shirt instead of the tee I was wearing. Mom would notice I changed, but I could just tell her I was cold. She'd feel my forehead to make sure I wasn't running a fever, and once she figured out I wasn't, I'd be home free. My plan was perfect except for one thing. I really was running a temperature. You feel warm. I'm just a little chilly, Mom. Let me feel your forehead again. AWW. Hold still, yeah. You're warm. I'm getting the thermometer. Really? Yes. It's going in my mouth, right? Mom burst out laughing, but I didn't see the humor in it. I was too worried about her seeing my bruise while she was in the bathroom getting the thermometer. I sneaked into my room and went straight to my dresser for a long-sleeved shirt. I opened it, searching underneath stacks of tees, when I found something that wasn't supposed to be there. Rolled up inside my Spider-Man, under robes, was the Snoopy dog. I think I must have cried out, because Mom came rushing into the room, worriedly asking if I was all right, if I needed to lie down. At that point, all I remember was staring into the open dresser drawer, trying to convince myself what I saw was a hallucination brought on by the fever. What's this doing in here? What's what doing? Your father's cologne, why is it in your drawer? I don't know. Did you put it there? No. Are you lying to me? I'm not lying. Then how did it get in there? Air by itself. I got spanked for that one. And not knowing what I did about the Snoopy dog, I really couldn't blame her for it. I was taught to tell the truth, reinforced by an open hand, or wooden spoon when I didn't. This was back when it was not only okay to hit your kids when they were bad, but expected. She made a show of taking it from my drawer and putting it back on top of Dad's dresser, and not only made sure I watched, but that Dad was aware I was messing around with this thing. He didn't seem too upset by it, more like he was pretending to be to placate Mom. He pretty much never meted out the punishment when I got in trouble, only bore witness to Mom's dirty work. I wish I could say this was the only time it got out of the bedroom, seemingly without help, and the only time I got blamed for doing it. Later I came to realize that's exactly what it wanted. It seemed to wait just long enough that Mom and Dad would forget about the previous incident. In a way, it was like it every time was the first, and my punishments reflected that. If the worst that ever happened is I got spanked or grounded, I wouldn't have such awful memories of the Snoopy dog. It seemed to delight in torturing me, and made every attempt to isolate me from those I loved, until the day it figured out it could use me in ways I hadn't even dreamed. I found it at the bottom of the dirty clothes basket the day my best friend's mom died. One white whisker. Previous next. The third story. Taking turns. Part 5. It would be 2 more years before I found out about sex, or aspects of such. From personal experience in the meantime, I had the trauma of what I came to refer to as bedbugs to keep me warm at night. Bedbugs was what I went to sleep hoping out of nightmares to cleanse from my memory. I guess I was lucky in that. With all the things going on around me, I began to lose details, and it eventually became just a word. A word, and a frame was nebulous. Insensate middle swirled with darkness and shadows and scratches of sinister deeds like a Goya. The resilience of youth. Mom and Dad had trouble looking me in the eye for a couple of weeks. I couldn't really blame them. Ours wasn't a family that cared much for an audience. In fact, like grief, sex was a topic best suited for, well, never it. It's not like I'd never seen them unclothed. I used to bathe with Dad when I was tiny, and Mom, well, if she had occasion to walk around with nothing on, she did. Bed beaks, however, was something I didn't yet understand nor particularly care to. Supposedly, it was how I came to be, but I had a hard time believing it. There was just no way I was involved with that business, no matter how small I was. I was pretty sure parents who wanted kids just went to the baby store, or maybe a vending machine. The mom took her baby pill, and that was it. Maybe bedbugs was how they proved to the people in charge they were serious about wanting kids. Anything that's scary had to be a test. The thing that bothered me most was why they were doing it now. I was told by Mom, without reluctance nor uncertainty. I was both implanted in a handful of turbulent circumstances. A mistake. Why would they want to take the bedbugs test again? Did this mean I would soon have a brother or another sister? I didn't know if I liked that idea. We, as a family, had enough problems without another kid coming along and upgrading our carefully metered chaos to cats and dogs cohabiting anarchy. As the days wore on, and I went through them seemingly without irreparable harm, Mom and Dad began to dance around the subject of bed bugs, sometimes individually, sometimes together. It became a middle of supper topic, or ice cream cones in the car in the Friendly's parking lot topic. Sometimes when a man and a woman kissed on the TV topic, and on a handful of occasions, a ride to or from school in the car with Mom topic. Whisker, honey, isn't it? Do you remember? Remember what? When you saw us? Huh? In the bedroom? No, sorta. Did it scare you? I don't know. Mommy needs to know if you were scared. Sweetie, don't remember. You don't remember anything? Nestled. Nothing at all. Nestled. Nothing I want to talk about. What? Nestled. You are. What, honey? Can we talk about something else? It's okay, sweetie. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Huh? I've had a milkshake. You want a milkshake? A strawberry one? Yeah, that's my good boy. Let's clap. I wasn't quite sure which good boy she was referring to. Just that morning, I was cursed blue for leaving my dirty clothes on the floor after repeated requests to put them in the basket. Perhaps over the course of a day where I spent my free time trying to get Jazz to draw armored knights fighting dragons with me or coaxing him to join us for a soccer match at recess and Mom at home, laundering, vacuuming, dusting, and all around straightening up the house. The enormity of my task, and the sheer monotony of hers, drawn together like magnets, effected some universal convergence whose completion somehow lessened the severity of my transgressions. Or it was bribery. It was well documented I could be bought, especially with food for as long as I could remember. I had the stomachs. The one was born with a little hole beside it that became its own stomach. The one I was born with told me I was hungry. I needed to eat, picky though I was, and I generally heeded its instruction. But the one that grew next to it, well, it was the one that told me I had to eat something after a bad day at school, or when Mom yelled and called me names, and hid me until I couldn't stand up. It didn't really care what I put in, but a tower to turn off my tongue and my brain, so things I didn't normally like to eat were okay to eat, were okay to eat, were gone. As long as I did my best to fill it, and while putting food in my born-in stomach gave me some satisfaction, putting it in the other only really kept me from feeling worse. Not only did this second stomach grow as I got older, it grew into my born-in one until, to look at them, they were virtually indistinguishable. I didn't think it a problem except second stomach grew so much it could never be full, never satisfied, and it got so I had to actively shut out the nagging, scratching, biting that were its reminders. Not that day. It was already one I'd just as soon toss in the trash with the rest of my undesirables. But Mom, having brought up a bed box, pushed me beyond remission. Milkshakes, after donuts, were at the top of my children's book of home remedies. Friendlies had one that I especially enjoyed, but honestly, any milkshake would do it as tough, especially to 6-year-old sensibilities. To fuck up a milkshake. Mom went through the drive-thru and got me a fish sandwich and some fries to go with it. She got a double hamburger, like always, and we drove to the park to eat. I normally ignore the ducks that swam around the ponds, but that day I wanted to see them to my chagrin. They still weren't back from having flown south, and my mood dark. and the fish I was normally quite fond of. Sliced thin, fried and salted potatoes. Even the soothing, pink blended milk and ice cream were flat and unappealing. I ate slowly, careful not to look at Mom too long. She kept smiling at me, and it gave me the pea feeling. How's your milkshake? Okay. Just okay. It's good. And your food? And your food? Yeah. Screeching, crashing cars and trucks and planes and helicopters in my head told me where the conversation was headed. But soggy sandwich, limp fries and chalky milkshake made the noise seem far away. Even the Van family, the one I secretly wished was my own, screaming through bloody bits of broken glass and twisted metal, couldn't bring me out of it. I resigned myself to the inevitable and set my shoulders in lax anticipation. I talked to Mrs. Greer. Oh, she really likes you. You know, she told me what you'd talked about. She did. And she says is having a hard time, and you said you would help him through it. I guess. I'm very proud of you. Losing his mom must be killing him. Probably. Maybe we should take him to see a movie. Do you think he'd like that? I don't know. Well, what sort of things does he like to do? I had a hard time trying to articulate nothing. There were a lot of things as he used to love to do. Soccer, movies, monsters, anything Star Wars, but anymore. Being a friend to him was like being by myself in an empty room. I thought being friends was hanging out, doing stuff together, having a good time, since his mom died. We were only really doing the first one, and that was debatable. He didn't laugh. He didn't play. He barely even talked to me. He spent all day in a chair or at his desk, staring at the floor. Even when we went outside for recess, he just leaned against the wall watching the cars go past. Most days I stayed with him, but it was slowly getting warmer. There were all kinds of sticks and stones just waiting to be launched between the trees at other classmates. I was frustrated and bored, and when I tried to talk to Chas, his monosyllabic responses wore thin with me. I just wanted to kick him in the nuts and yell at him to wake the fuck up. This wasn't the topic I'd prepared for, but it didn't make it a better one. I don't really know anymore. Oh. Well, what about the arcade? You both like that, right? I guess that would be okay. Good. I'll let your father know. Maybe you can go this weekend. Great. Finish up, we need to get going. I curled my lip at the thought of finishing my meal, but a little voice in my belly goaded me into another bite, and another after that. I thought about what Mom said, about what she said Mrs. Greer said, and about Chas. I silently hoped Mom was done asking me questions, but something dark and ravenous quivered in the back of my mind, promising the dilemma with Chas was only getting started. I felt my stomach churn as clock. At least it wasn't bedbugs. Mom was mostly Jekyll the rest of the school weekend. For that I was thankful. I had enough developing at school that getting it from the other end at home might send me over the edge. I tried talking to him about my dad taking us to the arcade on Saturday, and for what seemed like the first time, he was the least bit receptive. It was a few weeks since the last time I was there. The town I lived in had two, one called Starship and the other the Gallery, that were practically right across the street from each other. I preferred Starship, they had better games, but the Gallery was right across the alley from Pizza Bill's, which was and still is the best pizza ever, and came in a respectable third in my book of home remedies that made them pretty much equal to my 6-year-old esteem. When I talked to Dad about it on Friday, I was surprised to find out we would not be going to either of the ones downtown, but a relatively new one closer to where Chaz lived called the Boom Boom Barn. I thought the name was hinky, but it was an arcade, which meant it had games, and being new, would have the latest ones as long as there were games and I had tokens. I didn't care. Saturday morning rolled around and I was eager to get the walk to the bank done and over with so we could make with the taking Chaz to the arcade. We took Dad's work car, the Plymouth. It smelled like cleanser and factory grease. He used to drive us, and he colored Camaro with rust on the doors and a broken window crank handle on the passenger side. I liked it better than the Plymouth, but it was gone, sold to a friend of my sister's. Why are you driving this car? Mom needs the other one. Oh, I thought you liked this car. I liked the other one better. I did too. Why did you get rid of it? Well, Eddie's friend needed a car. But don't you need a car too? Sure, that's why I have this one. But why didn't you just keep the other one? It needed a lot of work. Oh. Besides, this is a good car too. It smells. I guess it does. Chaz was waiting outside with his dad when we got there. His dad talked to mine for a few minutes while Chaz and I got in the back end. I made sure he got in on the side that didn't have the big stain on the seat. We sat there in silence for several moments. He seemed tired, like he usually did at school. We're going to that new arcade at the mall. Yeah, should have all the latest stuff. Okay, think they have a party claw? Dunno, I bet they have one. I'll try to win you something cool. Cool. Did you see Buck Rogers last night? Not on have a TV in my room. Oh, it was pretty cool. There was this guy, Whisker. URM, yeah. Thanks. The Boom Boom Barn was state of the art, boasting to full rooms of upright games, pinball machines, prize games like the Party Claw, and even a sit-down racing game in the center of the floor on the upper deck. Even though Chaz brought his own money, Dad gave us each $10 and put a 5 of his own in the token machine. I walked with Chaz through both rooms, trying to get a lay of the land before I decided what to play. They had all my old favorites: Frogger, Centipede, Galaga. I even saw Missile Command, which was perhaps my least adored next to Pong, and I stuck out my tongue in disgust. I surveyed the prizes for the Party Claw, but was disappointed to find they were junky and boring and not as cool as what I was used to from the ones in town back home. It didn't matter, we did come to play. With both front pockets jammed full of tokens, I set about laying waste to pixelated aliens and sex, and insects, and whatever else they threw at me. Synthesizer music pumped through my ears and into my blood, giving me an adrenaline high. 30 minutes later, I'd barely made a dent in my funds, but my forehead was sweaty and I had to pee. I kept my knees together while I flew a jet through time, annihilating enemy spacecraft, from WW-style book pains to flying saucers. I smacked the joystick in disbelief when the screen flashed game over, but my bladder was grateful, and I waddled off to the restroom. Having finished my business, I washed up and headed to the door, pulling it open just far enough to squeeze by. I wasn't watching in front of me, and something checked my shoulder as I pushed forward, whipping me back against the wall. Hey boy younger than me, down, shoulders hunched, shrugged apologetically and pushed past. I silently cursed his manners, but my head was still light from digitized euphoria, and armed with an empty bladder, I was set for a rematch. Whisker, what or why are you doing here? I slowed down and looked to my left to see Bashike, a girl I kind of knew from school, standing next to the Galaxian machine. She was older and towered over me, even from a few feet away. Come over here. She crooked her finger at me and, like a good dog, I patted over, staring at her feet. She wore saddle shoes with red ribbons threaded over the white laces tied in bows at the top. Hi, Bashike. Well, aren't you all hot shit with your big boy shoes? I guess so. Look at me when I'm talking to you. I looked her in the face to see her jaw set, brow furrowed. Normally she wore thick lensed glasses that made her eyes look huge, but not that day. They were normal size. She had her hair coiled up in a single, thick pigtail on top of her head with beaded hair ties that matched the shoe ribbons. Once she knew I was looking her straight, her face softened a little, and she smiled, all teeth and gums, and planted an index finger into the sore shoulder. I groaned. That's better. What are you doing here all by your little self? I'm here with Chaz and my dad. As if on cue, Dad appeared next to me, putting a hand on my shoulder. He smiled briefly and Bashike returned it, bigger, rocking back and forth with her hands twisted up in front of her. Hi, Mr. White. Hello, Bashike. I was just asking Whisker why he was here all by himself. That's very thoughtful of you, Bashike. I'm heading over to the bookstore for a little while. You think you'll be all right here with Chaz? I nodded quickly, catching Bashike smiling like the Cheshire Cat in my periphery. Okay, kiddo. Have a good time. Nice to see you, Bashike. You too, Mr. White. Dad left the arcade, and I quickly scanned the room looking for Chaz, but couldn't find him. Bashika put her hands on my shoulders and stood me in front of her. The top of my head came up below her shoulders. She wore a white sweatshirt with an apple key rainbow on the chest. I noticed little bumps on either side, and a small part of my brain wondered if she was cold. Are you staring at my boobs? Huh? What? Are you staring? A-T. M-Y-B-O-O-B-S. I know, why would I? You saying I'm ugly? I don't think so. Why don't you K-N-O-W-S-O? Bashike. I need more tokens. The boy who almost knocked me down came up beside us and held out his hand. Bashike craned her neck at him, lips parted, jaw aslant, and looked at his open, like it was covered in dog shit. After a long pause, she flipped an open hand up flat against the bottom of his, smacking him in the face. O-W shit. Can't you see I'm B-U-S-Y? Bashike. Don't you Bashike, be not my fault no one taught you manners. Ain't gotta hit me like that. I didn't. You hit yourself. Stupid. MPH. Bashike turned back to me, my slit head, smiling with half her mouth. I felt something shrink. This is my little brother. Damius, say hi to Whisker. Damius. And GH. Hi. You out of money already? Just about. Here. She dug in the front pocket of her green corduroy pants and pulled out a small handful of tokens, dropping half of them and slapping the rest into Damius, and he dropped some of those. quickly shoved what was left into his pocket and got on his knees to get the rest Bashike sneered, her eyes never leaving me. Now leave us alone, say goodbye to Whisker. Damias. Bye. He scampered off and left me alone with Bashike. I dared not turn my head, but my eyes scanned the room, looking for Chaz, my dad. Even an employee who might be able to distract her long enough for me to get away. The room was dark, virtually empty, and getting smaller. I was running out of options. You should smile more. It helps to, have a reason to. Well, aren't you fresh? I didn't. Didn't what? I've seen you around school, you know. I see how you look at the teachers, Mrs. Perrin's daughter, the other girls. I don't know what you mean. You know exactly what I mean. I really don't. Bashike punched me in the shoulder, pouting her bottom lip. Her eyes were dark and wet and made me want to crawl away. Why don't you do that to me, white boy? White. She grabbed my arm at the wrist and held it up, showing it to me. White, whiter than white you, Ray Wonderbread white. You're Casper the white ass ghost white shit. Even your name's white. It's not like I can help. Snoopy White, hear that? Little Snoopy dog. What did you say? Little Snoopy dog. B-A-S-H-I-K-A father. Essie, we gotta go. Damias ran up to us and tried to take Bashike's hand, but she smacked it away with a scowl. Then she shoved me with her palm and walked past with Damias in tow. See you in school, Snoopy dog. And she was gone. My mind reeled at her mention of the Snoopy dog. It was not a topic I shared with anyone. To me, it was a nightmare, both wakey and unconscious. I felt was mine alone to endure. I hadn't thought much about it since bedbugs, and my last encounter was weeks before. I found it at the bottom of the dirty clothes basket while picking up my room. I'd begun to think my problems with the Snoopy dog were over. I'd hoped they were over, like only children do. I would come to find out otherwise. I hadn't seen you since before I left the restroom, and that made my stomach nervous. I searched both rooms and found nothing, thinking he maybe had to pee. I checked the toilet, but it was empty. I was getting scared, wishing my dad was there to help me find him. I considered trying to find an employee, but so far the only one I'd seen was a fat, middle-aged guy with greasy hair and an equally greasy complexion at the prize counter. While I'm sure he knew everything there was to know about Space Invaders, unless there was a video game called Missing Best Friend, he wouldn't do much more than slow me down. At my limit, I stopped in a dark corner of the upper deck, flanked by the Dig, Dug and Berserk machines. I was sweaty, thirsty and positive I would be in big trouble for losing Chaz. My fear was slowly being replaced with resignation, and a cold stillness crept up my spine. I thought to myself, this must be what it feels like when people go to jail. Where the fuck are you, Chaz? Whisker? The voice was small, muffled, but it was definitely Chaz. I turned around and saw him sitting on the floor against the wall in the corner. It was so dark, I could see only the tips of his shoes, which used to be white, but were scuffed and worn to a somber top. I squeezed between the game cabinets, as next to him, pulling my knees up to my chin. He was sitting much the same way. What are you doing back here? Sitting. Duh. You thinking? About what? My mom. Oh, It was the first time Ches mentioned anything about his mom since the accident, and a subject I'd yet to broach, thinking a good friend was about allowing him to bring his own terms. But it was something I hoped never came up. I didn't talk much about Grandma either, and my grasp of her passing wasn't so much a concept of death as it was a deep, bone-whittling sadness from her absence in my life. Thanksgiving, Christmas would never be the same without going to her house, sitting with her, laughing, telling stories, eating until we couldn't walk and passing out on the couch to holiday specials and candlelight. Her house was sold to whom I didn't know, and we never drove to that part of town anymore, and especially never passed what once was hers. Maybe death was as much her ceasing to live as it was her living in the memories of who she was in all of us. Either way it hurt, and I didn't like associating pain with someone I loved, so I spent less time trying to remember, hoping that it might fade to acceptable levels by doing nothing, where my memory of Grant might a tiny bit less with each passing week. 2 months gone. Chaz's wounds were still very fresh. For him, time stopped with his mom's death, and he was doomed to twist in eternal, tortuous limbo. I winced at the thought, but found nothing within myself to say that might offer the slightest bit of comfort. I miss her. Yeah. I miss her kisses before bed. I miss how she made peanut butter and jelly. Yeah. Peanut butter on both sides, jelly in the middle. Yum. He felt a little better inside finally talking to him about his mom. I hoped he felt that same way. I want to see her. Yeah. What, like at the cemetery? Just turned to me and looked me straight in the eye. Even in the dark I could see they were big and clear like a cartoon. In heaven, one white whisker. Previous next.